Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. In November, a new behind-the-scenes account of the conflict between Pope Francis and his opponents in the Vatican will be published. And with the Pope's highly anticipated visit to the U.S. just 2 weeks away, many Catholics are asking whether the pontiff can improve the Church's tarnished image of scandal and corruption. Here to weigh in is Gerald Posner, author of God's Bankers, A History of Money and Power at the Vatican. Welcome to you, Gerald.
Hi, Lauren. Glad to be back with you.
Well, first of all, how is the Pope cleaning up the Vatican?
I mean, he's cleaning it up by being an energetic reformer, especially in terms of its finances. You know, the Vatican Bank had been sort of scandal-plagued for decades, and he came in and inherited this bank and considered for a while closing it. They didn't know if they were going to keep it. It's sort of the Vatican's like equivalent of a Federal Reserve. And they didn't close it in the end, but he brought in independent outsiders to try to clean it up. They're doing that very well. They've closed thousands of suspicious accounts, and he's getting resistance. This book that you said that's coming out in November, and the book that I published back in February on God's Bankers has shown that there are traditionalists inside the Vatican who don't like these changes. They don't like the reforms. They're fighting him, and they're resisting it. It's a tough road for him. It's hard for him to do it on his own, but he's trying pretty diligently to make sure that they come into the 21st century when it comes to transparency and obeying the law.
Now, your book really outlines a host of corruptions and scandals going back decades, if not centuries. And so explain sort of the high points and the low points of what's wrong with the Vatican Bank and all the scandals within the Vatican. How deep is it?
Yeah, so, I mean, the problem is, you know, you're dealing with a 2,000-year-old institution, but what we call the Vatican Bank has only existed since World War II, so it's only been around for 70 years. They formed it in the middle of World War II, and the problem with the Vatican Bank is that from its inception, it did business with the Nazis. After the war, it was the area through which agencies like the CIA funneled millions of dollars into the Italian political system to get conservatives to the top, and then it was used by money launderers and the mafia over decades. At one point, it had to pay $250 million to a whole host of banks as part of an enormous fraud. And Italian businessmen who did business with it ended up often dead, one of them poisoned in jail and another one hanging under London Bridge. So in comes Pope Francis in 2013, and he says, I'm going to change this bank. And you know, I've heard that from popes before, so I wasn't quite sure if he was serious. But he was the real deal. A new sheriff was in town, and he changed the structure of it. He opened it up for the Europeans to come in from Brussels and give it some oversight, which it never had before. So it's cleaning up its act. But at the same time, there are these traditionalists inside of the Vatican who have been there for 20 or 25 years, working inside the bank, and they like it the old way. They like operating with billions of dollars in the dark, in which nobody knows what they're doing with it, and they don't like the light of transparency. And that's the fight between what I call these conservative clerics and Francis leading the reformers.
How does the Pope do this at the Vatican if it's so deep there? Who does he trust to help him?
Well, that's one of the, that's a great question. Who does he trust? Because in the old days, of course, and I mean the old days, the 12, 13, 1400s, popes were sometimes moved aside because they were poisoned along the way. One of the priests who was just quoted recently in a New York article about the fight between the traditionalists and Pope Francis said, the good news is we no longer use poison on the end of a chalice. Yeah, that is the good news. But it doesn't mean that they can't trip him up and slow him up. So what happens is he brings in part his own people, and he has surrounded himself with some people that he's trusted from before. He has some hand-selected. He's pushed some other people out. The Secretary of State, which is a very powerful position in the Vatican, had been held by a Cardinal Bertone, who had served under Benedict, the previous pope. He was slowly pushed out in the first year of Francis's papacy. It wasn't somebody that Francis trusted, and as a result, he's brought in his own person. You see him shifting around the personnel. The great thing for Francis in the Vatican is, in the end, we all have to remember this is basically a non-traditional or non-hereditary monarchy. It's run like he's a king and giving an order. There's no parliament. There's no Congress to check him. There's really no legislature. The Pope's word's the final word. Now, that doesn't mean that down the chain of command that people can't implement it very slowly or put it in a wrong way. But if the Pope orders it, it's supposed to get done.
All right, I want to thank you very much, Gerald Posner. The book is called God's Bankers, A History of Money and Power at the Vatican. Thank you so much. And of course, we'll probably hear from you more as we get closer to the Pope's historic visit to America. Thanks so much.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
And you want to check out foxnews.com for more on this developing story. I'm Lauren Green, and thanks for watching.